I've been on hormonal birth control 3 different times in my life. First, the pill, from when I was about 15 to 18. I went off it accidentally when I forgot to refill my prescription and realized it had been making me feel numb and disconnected. I briefly tried the NuvaRing in college and had mood swings where I was literally laughing one second and sobbing the next. My last foray into hormonal birth control was in 2016, ahead of the first Trump presidency. I was worried that our access to birth control and abortion might evaporate, and I got the Skyla hormonal IUD inserted. 6 months later, I was having multiple panic attacks the week before my period. But it took 2 more years for me to figure out that it was the IUD causing them. After finally looking up side effects to the Skyla, I found that 30% of users experienced significantly higher rates of anxiety, which made me shocked that no doctor or therapist that I had been seeing had even asked if I'd recently changed my birth control. Also, none of these forms of birth control had put a dent in my death cramps, which was always what I was hoping for. So what is birth control doing to our bodies exactly? What happens if we go off it after decades? Why does it feel like no one ever tells us this information?
What's happening to your body, we don't know, because we've never really studied the female body. Say it's all in my head, but the research is quite spotty. No, we've never really studied the female body. I go to the doctor to get dismissed. Try losing weight, you're just anxious. That's fine, that's cool, I'm not pissed. Just wait 10 years for a diagnosis. Psychosomatic, you're so dramatic. Hysterical, emotional, hormonal, erratic. Heart disease, chronic fatigue, depression and anxiety. Do you have pain? No, you don't, because we've never really studied the female body.
Welcome back to CRAMPED, the podcast where I try to find answers to my and other people's questions about their period pain. I'm your host, Kate Helen Downey. If you just found this podcast, you might want to start from the beginning of season 1 to get the whole story of my death cramps, some of the history of women's healthcare, and the reasons why we've never really studied the female body, like the song says. If you'd like to support this podcast, and we really do rely on your support as a completely independent show, you can do that via our Patreon at patreon.com/cramped. Patreon members get bonus episodes, as well as access to our Discord community full of other crampers sharing their own experiences and information that's helped them. And just a quick reminder, I am not a doctor, and this is not medical advice. Everything presented in Cramped is my own and other people's experiences. I am just a research nerd with a uterus and a microphone sharing what I've found. If you'd like to see our citations, you can go to katehelendowney.com/cramped and scroll down to each individual episode transcript. I'm a little behind right now, but I will try to catch up. Now let's talk about birth control. 22% of women ages 15 to 49 in the U.S. are using some form of hormonal birth control, according to the CDC's data from 2015 to 2017. At some point, most of these people will go off their hormonal birth control for one reason or another. Maybe due to unwanted side effects, wanting to get pregnant, losing access to healthcare, or a million other reasons. We know we can go off birth control whenever we choose to, and that theoretically our bodies will return to normal. But the details of what's been going on inside our bodies while we've been on birth control can be pretty fuzzy. And when the rubber meets the road and we start experiencing unexpected things, it can get weird, which is scarier and more uncomfortable when we don't know exactly what's happening or why. I was talking to a friend recently at a little movie night, and she had just gone off birth control. She had all these things happening that she didn't understand, which led her to big questions about birth control and hormones. When everybody started yelling at us for talking during the Nicolas Cage movie, I told her to email me her questions and we'd do an episode about it. So here we are.
Hi, I am Deanna Hart-Nokes. I am 36. I live in Los Angeles. I moved here about 4 years ago, and before that, I lived in New York for about 15 years.
So tell me what's going on, Deanna.
Yeah, so I recently got off birth control. I was using the NuvaRing for a little over a year, and I stopped putting it in May. My husband and I are wanting to start a family, and we just picked a random date and we were like, this sounds good. Let's try that. And I actually didn't realize that you should stop your birth control actually before you're planning to get pregnant. I always thought it was like you stop your birth control and then you're pregnant the next day, basically. That's how I thought it worked.
When it's talked about at all, it's either like, oh, we got pregnant accidentally, or I went off birth control and now I'm pregnant.
Yeah.
You don't really hear all the stuff that happens in between.
Yeah. But I guess it takes a while to work itself out of your system, which makes sense. And so, I went off birth control in May. Before that, I've been on birth control since I was 15. And I actually didn't start as a contraception method. I was having really irregular periods and I played water polo and I was a swimmer. They always said that swimming messes with your cycle. I've done zero research beyond someone saying that to me when I was 15, but I partially blame it on that. So I've been on birth control for most of my life. I went off for one other period of time during the pandemic, and it was literally just because I lost health insurance. America is so fun.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm definitely having a different experience this time than last time. And I don't know if that's just the difference of going off of the pill versus going off of a NuvaRing, or if it's because I'm actually like tracking what's going on with my body. I have all the apps and stuff, and I'm taking my temperature and taking ovulation tests and stuff like that. So I just have more insight when before I was probably just like, that's weird, and then never thought about it again.
Right. It's harder to track when you're like, I don't care.
Yeah, I don't care and I'm not paying attention.
Yeah.
I think now this time around, I'm actually noticing what's going on with my body. And I would say I was prepared for the emotional aspect of it because I knew that hormones impact your reactions to things. Some of the physical reactions or things that have popped up have been really surprising. Like I've noticed just like when I am in my ovulation week, or according to the app I am, like my boobs have like doubled in size, and like my nipple sensitivity and pain has been so noticeable in a way that it wasn't noticeable before. And then cramps. Really never struggled with cramps. Like I know a lot of people have really bad cramps and can be caused by other issues. And I luckily haven't. And I'm wondering if that was just masked by birth control for years and years. And now I'm all of a sudden having it, and spotting for sure. But I knew that was also a sign. But just kind of learning what my body does naturally without this control of an outside hormone has been really weird and interesting.
Yeah. So you said you went off in May. So it's been like a month, a little over a month.
It was like early May. I went off like May 7th, I think. So I've had 2 periods since then. So it's been like 2 full cycles since I went off.
Oh, okay. And you're having a definite period and some spotting and your boobs are really hurting, but it's not like I'm not having a period. I don't know what's going on. I don't have any like frame of reference. It's like, no, you're having a period. You're just also having other weird stuff happen.
Yeah, definitely still having a period. And I had it like around the same time I should have. So I was like, that's a good sign.
By should have, you mean like about the same cadence as it was when you were on birth control.
Yeah, like about the same time.
And you were on NuvaRing, so you were taking the NuvaRing out to get your period once a month.
Yes.
Got it. And the birth control that you were on when you were like a teenager and into your 20s, that was oral, like a pill?
Yeah. And I did have my period every month. I went through a stint where I did that, like, oh, you don't have to have your period at all. But something about that felt really wrong to me.
Right.
Even though I enjoyed it, I was just like, this feels like this is bad. So I'm not going to do that anymore.
Yeah. That thinking is very common, and it's why they include the placebo week in pills. Have you been talking to a doctor to come off of birth control, or is this just entirely a decision you're making on your own?
I did talk to my doctor. I haven't had a follow-up since then, but I did talk to my doctor before going off of birth control just to be like, what should I be prepared for? So I did have a conversation with my doctor before, and she was like, kind of gave me a heads up, was like, give it some time. I kind of researched, and it said from the NuvaRing or the pill, it can be about 3 months for your body to kind of regulate and ovulate again, which I was like, wait, was I not ovulating during that time? This feels like a really stupid question that I should have already known, but
no, there are truly no stupid questions. And honestly, the more basic we can state these questions, even though it feels embarrassing that we don't know that seemingly basic thing about our body's functioning, like the more useful it is. So don't feel embarrassed about about that.
No, totally. That's exactly it. You're like, I feel embarrassed because I feel like I should have known this about my body and how it works, but I didn't realize that you didn't ovulate. And then I'm like, oh, I guess that makes sense if you're trying to control the birth. But now I'm like, oh, so now my body's trying to figure out how to ovulate again. The lack of education we receive is difficult.
Yeah, man. How easily we're just put on birth control and given no further information or plan.
Yep. And have like no long-term data on how this impacts you. Like I was put on this when I was 15 and I'm 36 now.
Yeah.
And just now I'm like, oh, was I not ovulating for that whole time?
Right. Especially when you're 15. You may not even know about ovulating.
No.
And I was way more concerned with emoting to the lyrics of Les Mis when I was 15 than like, what's my body doing and what are the inner workings of my reproductive system?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I'm sure someone at some point when I was 15, 16, like explained ovulation to me and I was like, can I go?
I'm not sure that happened, honestly. I'm like, I don't know if that was ever told to me.
So what are the questions that you have about birth control, about what your body's doing right now, anything about this?
To get the most basic, like what does birth control actually do? And when you go off of it, what is your body getting rid of that it was holding before, and like what is it replacing it with? Those are all like basic questions that I never thought about until you're like, okay, well now I want to do the birth part of it. So I don't want to control it anymore. So like what was actually happening that whole time? And like why do the different birth control methods impact you differently? You know, like I know an IUD is a much more serious type of birth control that's like an implantation. And from what I've read, that can impact you 6 months afterwards. Similar with the rod. You know, if you do want to get pregnant after that, you have to take it out a lot sooner. And I'm like, but why? What was it doing that was different than taking the pill? What was it different than the ring? I'm also like, when I had the ring in, how is that emitting the same thing that I was taking orally?
Yeah.
Like, what were you doing in there that I just wasn't questioning for so long?
Yeah.
I think my other question would be about the side effects. I know that they can vary a lot from person to person. I've been having the weird experience with my boobs and my like nipple pain. Cramps are a big thing that I have been exposed to now. I even had one night where I literally couldn't stand up to make dinner anymore because my cramps were so bad. And I'm talking to someone like you who's experienced like very horrible cramps. Feels like me being a baby, being like, one night I had a owie, but like I was like, oh my God, is this like what other people are feeling all the time? This is so bad. Just like the side effects in general, because I know like the first time I went off birth control, I had acne like crazy. It was all over my chin and then it moved to my chest and my back. And I was like, I'm 30 years old. Like this is not supposed to be happening. But now this time around, no acne. I have not dealt with that at all. So I'm like, I don't know. There's just so many side effects that can vary. And everyone's like, yeah, it kind of depends on the person. And you're like, well, how do I prepare for that?
These are awesome questions. You sent me these ahead of time and I have some research for you and I have some answers for you.
Yay.
First, we're going to talk about how birth control works. So whatever kind of birth control, whether it's a pill, you have a ring inserted, if you have an implant, a shot, an IUD, they are all different methods of adding synthetic hormones to your system. There are different pathways, but you are getting synthetic hormones into your bloodstream one way or another. With the pill, you're taking it orally and through your digestive system, it's getting absorbed into your bloodstream. And so the pills often have a higher level of hormones that are going into your system because less of the hormone ends up in your bloodstream when you take it through your digestive system. And then when it's a ring that's up your vagina, you are relying on the mucous membrane of your vagina to absorb the hormones. And then an implant is like right next to your bloodstream, so it's kind of leaking hormones into your bloodstream. The shot is inserting hormones directly into your bloodstream. And an IUD is in your uterus, so it is releasing those hormones really close to the organs that need to receive them. Usually, if it's a combination contraceptive, it's a combination of progestin and estradiol, which are the synthetic forms of progesterone and estrogen, which are hormones your body makes naturally. The hormones that your body makes naturally and any synthetic hormones that get into your system are messengers. It's a complicated system, the hormonal system, that I am still learning so much about. And I'm going to do an analogy here, so just go with me.
Thank God, I love an analogy.
Your body is an airport. Your hypothalamus, which is a little gland in your brain, that is air traffic control. The plane and the pilots are the different organs in our body. Air traffic control is getting a lot of information coming in all the time. It's getting information about weather patterns, the position of planes on the runway, wind direction, all of these different forms of information from the world outside and what's happening inside the airport system. In air traffic control, they are making decisions that take all of that information into account, and then they send instructions to the pilots on the runway. They do not have access to the information that air traffic controllers do. They are just kind of following instructions, doing what the air traffic controllers tell them to. The air traffic controllers are the ones sending the messages and changing the instructions. I don't know if that's the way airports work, so
It sounded right to me.
let's just go with it. So, air traffic control is the hypothalamus, pilots in the planes are the organs and the functions in your body, and the messages that air traffic control is sending to those pilots are hormones. I think it's really easy to think of hormones almost like vitamins. We just need a certain level of this hormone, and if we have too little of it, we need to put more in. And we shouldn't think of hormones the same as vitamins. They are messengers. So they're not supposed to be at the same level all the time. The purpose of hormones, what our body uses hormones for, is for the brain that has all this information coming in. The brain signals the body and the organs and the functions to do certain things or not do certain things. So they're literally just messages like a text message or picking up the phone.
So they're just delivering the messages to the different parts of the body.
They are the messages. The organs don't do anything, or they have a basic function that they're doing, but then they're waiting for messages to tell them to okay, grow, okay, make this, okay, release, okay, build. And if they don't get that message, they don't do that thing.
Okay.
The air traffic controllers have always been there. They have created a system. They know what they're doing. They are sending the same kinds of messages in the same kind of sequence to the pilots all the time. And things are, hopefully running pretty smoothly. The planes are flying on time. There's no traffic jams on the runway. Everything's kind of chugging along. Let's say you start taking birth control. You're adding synthetic hormones in. And essentially what you're doing is firing the air traffic controllers that have been working this job the whole time and replacing them with new contractors. And these contractors kick everybody out from the old squad. They're like, you're not in charge of this anymore. We're in charge of this now. They sit down in those air traffic control seats. They're taking in all the information. But instead of sending different messages at different times, they're sending the same message all the time, which is nobody do anything. Nobody fly, nobody move. Everybody just sit tight. No planes are leaving today. Nothing's happening. Everybody's grounded no matter what else is happening in the world, no matter what other messages we're getting, we're saying nothing's happening. And it goes out like a recorded message, all pilots do nothing, stop it, don't do anything, except your normal functions, your baseline maintenance functions.
As an event planner, this analogy really works for me. I completely get that. There are some times at events where I'm everybody stop. No one do a single thing until you hear from me.
Yes. So the follicles in your ovary do not get the message to mature and then release an egg. So you're not ovulating. The lining of your uterus is not getting the message to build and thicken. So that doesn't happen. And if you don't ovulate, you can't get pregnant. So that's how the birth control part of birth control works. So this message to do nothing only changes if you take away the synthetic hormone. So that happens if you take your placebo week of pills, if you take out the ring, if you remove your IUD. You don't remove your IUD, a doctor does. But if you take away those new air traffic controllers, there's nobody in the air traffic control tower. And the old air traffic controllers kind of sneak back in and they're like, wait, is it empty in here? Are we allowed to come back in? And they kind of pick up their headphones and start cautiously sending messages again, just being like, yo, pilots, are you there? What is going on? and they start doing their jobs again, but like just a little bit, just enough to kind of like get things moving a tiny bit. And so maybe you get your period, but it's like a really light period because your lining didn't thicken. And then when you reintroduce those synthetic hormones,
They show up again.
they show up again. They're like, get out of here, stop it. And then they start broadcasting the message like, nobody do anything, everybody stay where you are. And so that's essentially how birth control works. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Welcome back to CRAMPED. We're talking about how hormonal birth control works with an analogy that has possibly gotten out of hand and revealed how little I know about how airports work. So let's say you take away the synthetic hormones and then you don't add them back in. So the original air traffic controllers are back in the tower. They've cautiously started sending messages again, but they're not sure what's going on.
Because they haven't been there for so long. There's dust everywhere.
Exactly. There's dust everywhere. Maybe there's like new kinds of planes. The planes are like kind of doing stuff they didn't used to do. There's new weather patterns. Everything is like older than it was before. And so like it works a little differently. And they're rusty. They're out of practice. They haven't done this in a really long time, if they ever even got good at it. And so they have to learn the ropes again. They have to build new systems or remember their old systems. And maybe their old systems don't work so well anymore. Maybe that worked when there was less information coming in, but there's different information and they like need to figure out how to do it. So it's just kind of a mess. Maybe there's some traffic jams on the runway. Maybe there's even like a plane crash, a minor disaster. Maybe the passengers are going to get cranky, uncomfortable. I don't know who the passengers are in this analogy.
I was like, who are the passengers?
I don't know. But like there's problems, right? It's not functioning smoothly.
They're like, her hips are kind of cracking and her knees also crack when she bends down now.
Yeah. Yeah, what's with that? We're getting a lot of different stress signals than we used to. Like,
Yeah, so weird. What is this anxiety that's riddled through your body?
Yeah.
No, that makes so much sense. The time that it takes for your body to be quote unquote normal again is just like your body learning how to do that again because it hasn't had to for so long.
You know how big companies need like a head of communications to communicate with the outside world, but also just to like make sure everybody at the company knows what the fuck is going on? Because in any organization, it is hard to communicate and it's complicated and things get left out, things get miscommunicated. That happens all the time. When you go off hormonal birth control, your body essentially like got a whole new C-suite. And it's like, what communication needs to happen? In what order?
If your body hasn't done those things for so long, I'm just thinking specifically of my like ovulation tests and how they barely spiked last month and now they're spiking a little bit more. I'm like, your body hasn't done that consistently since I was 15. And even then it was like, I had just started my period. So my body never got good at doing that. So it totally makes sense that it's like, I'm literally learning how to do this for the first time, basically.
100%. And every function of your body is controlled or triggered or stopped by hormones. So if your hormones are like doing something weird, it can affect so many different things, like your skin, like your sleep, just like things you wouldn't think would be related to your reproductive system. But because your hormones are doing something different, it has knock-on effects. If one thing spikes, it might cause something else to decline. And then that causes something else to happen. So it's all these like cascading effects that like we can't even really track. But it could mean you go off birth control and then you can't sleep. You go off birth control and then suddenly you have acne like you're 12 again. Basically any symptom you have, unless it's like a blood clot or a stroke, which are really serious and bad. If you talk to your doctor about it, you're like, I went off birth control last month and now this is happening to me. They'll be like, yeah, that's normal. That's totally expected, totally fine. You're like, are you kidding? Pregnancy is another time when your hormones are doing things they've never done before. I just saw a TikTok of a woman who was like, yeah, my toenail fell off. And I called the doctor and he was like, normal.
I feel like every time I see anyone talk about being pregnant, I'm like, I feel like pregnant women have lied for so long about what actually happens and what their experience is.
Well, also just the range of experiences can be huge. And so you have no idea. I mean, if you think back to puberty, when your body's doing all this weird stuff it never did before, your body is literally figuring out that communication for the first time with all these new systems coming online. And so it's wild. Like, it's really fluctuating. Things are some months working one way, some months working another way. And it's just figuring it out. It's growing pains. It is working out how this works for you specifically with your own environmental context, your internal context. It's different for everybody, even though it sort of broadly follows the same pattern usually. A lot of people went on birth control when they were 14, 15. Maybe you had gotten a period, your body was in the middle of this process of figuring it out, which can take 3, 4 years. Like, a lot of people have really irregular periods when they first get their period, like for 6 months or a year, because literally your body's just like figuring out how to do it.
I bled for a month straight and then fainted because of loss of blood. And then I didn't have a period for 3 months after that. And that was what originally got me started on that, was because I had bled for over 30 days straight, and not just a light amount. And they were like, okay, well, you should probably just go on birth control. And I was like, okay.
I feel like I say this every time, but birth control is an amazing tool. Birth control is so important. It's such a good option. It can mean that we have agency and autonomy over our own reproductive system. If you need to stop bleeding, that's really crucial. If there's really bad pain happening and you just need relief from that, it's so cool and important that we have that option. But if you are on birth control when your body hasn't totally figured out how to do this yet, then when you go off it again, it's oh, you never learned to do this. You're literally still figuring it out for kind of the first time.
That actually makes me feel a lot better, because I, of course, was stressing about everything that was happening and being oh my God, what if I'm one of those people that can't get pregnant, or it's going to take me a really long time? And I waited until I was 36 and now I'm all stressed out. And that actually, what you just said, makes me feel a lot better about just no, my body's doing this for the very first time. And it's just it needs a minute, and I'm just very impatient.
As the kids say, let it cook.
Yeah.
You're saying oh, how long until my period is normal? And it's well, what do you mean by normal? Because normal, a 28-day cycle where you ovulate at day 14, your body might never do that, because that might not be your balance. And so I think redefining what normal is. So is normal just consistent, that it's happening the same every month? Because that might not happen either, because our hormone system is literally built to react to environmental changes, which is so cool that we have a system that can be hey, there's not enough food. Don't get pregnant, bitch. You can't feed a baby if we're in the middle of a famine.
You're thanks, body. I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's built to take care of you. It's built to react. If you're in fight or flight all the time, it's yeah, you're not going to have a baby because your body is getting the signal that you're in danger, that you are being chased by a tiger all the time, and it's not a good time to have a baby. So yeah. The world we live in can be sending these signals to our body that we're not in a good place to reproduce. And that can really affect our hormone levels. That is difficult, but it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with our bodies or our hormones. It's that we're living in a world that isn't built for us as people with uteruses, that we have to fight to survive in often, and that we don't have great options or support or care for. That sucks, but also give yourself a break.
And healthcare wasn't designed for us either. We didn't have access to information for a really long time, which is new. And I feel like I've learned more in the past 50 minutes of talking to you than than I have in my years of having my actual body.
That's why the tagline of the podcast is having a microphone gets you more answers than having a uterus, because it's sadly true.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen a chart of quote unquote normal hormone fluctuation across a cycle?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, let's look at one. I have one for you. This is my favorite hormone chart because it shows your lining too.
Ooh.
For everyone listening, I know this is not necessarily the most fun to listen to.
Go Google this chart.
Google this chart. It's the Britannica.com/science/menstrual cycle chart. And I will post this on my Instagram as well, so you can go there to find it. This chart shows you stacked what's happening in your endometrial lining, what's happening with your hormone levels, and what's happening with your ovaries.
This is crazy.
Yeah, this helps me so much to understand what everybody's doing all the time. So we've got the endometrium, which is shedding during your period. So while you're bleeding, in this chart, days 0 through 4. And you can see all of the hormones are at their lowest point during your bleed.
Oh, and that's the LH level. That's what the ovulation test is looking for.
Yes, exactly.
Is that LH number?
Yeah, luteinizing hormone.
Did not know what it stands for. I was just like, LH, great.
LH is luteinizing hormone. Yeah. Part of the reason you can feel like shit on your period is that all of your hormones are cratering. They are low levels, and so you can feel like depleted, you can feel tired, all of that. At that point in your ovary, some follicles have been selected to start growing and maturing with the egg in them. And so by the time you ovulate, halfway through your cycle-ish, one follicle will be dominant and will ideally burst out. So between getting your period and ovulating, some hormonal things start to happen. Your estrogen rises very quickly through your follicular phase, which is the phase when your follicles are growing in your ovary. Your estrogen is rising, and you see this slope where it's rising fairly steadily and slowly, and then it spikes right before ovulation. Whereas LH, the luteinizing hormone, stays low, 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 and then spikes really quickly and really high. The combination of the estrogen and the luteinizing hormone spiking, as well as this FSH, which is follicle stimulating hormone, which is part of what's telling your follicles to grow and develop, that also spikes, but not as much. And so the combination of these three hormones doing something at the same time, like spiking all at once, is what tells your body, okay, time to ovulate, release that egg, let's go. What you see here too is that estrogen and luteinizing hormone spike before ovulation. They are not spiking during ovulation or after, they're spiking before ovulation because that's the signal to ovulate.
Ah, that's the message.
Yes. If we were looking at the chart of someone who is on synthetic birth control, which again is a synthetic form of estrogen and a synthetic form of progesterone, you would just see flat lines. The follicle doesn't develop, the ovary doesn't release its egg, the lining of the uterus doesn't build and grow. So speaking of which, let's talk about progesterone, because you see progesterone is doing pretty much nothing, is pretty much flatlined.
Until after the ovulation.
Exactly. Because the thing that's producing progesterone is this empty follicle on your ovary that just released the egg. This little wormy looking thing is called the corpus luteum.
It looks like a shower cap.
Yeah, it looks weird. It looks like a little brain. The corpus luteum is literally a little organ that you grow every time you ovulate on the follicle that ovulated. It develops, it releases a bunch of progesterone. So your progesterone levels go way up. That signals, along with some other stuff, but mostly progesterone signals to the uterine lining to like really thicken and prepare for a potential fertilized egg to implant. Because obviously if you don't ovulate, your body's like, don't waste the effort on bulking up the uterine lining because you're not going to need to house a fetus, and that is costly for us. A crazy thing I just found out is that in your luteal phase, in the 2-ish weeks between ovulation and getting your period, your body burns about 300 extra calories a day. Partly because this rise in progesterone means your body is hotter, which you know if you've been taking your temperature, basal body temperature, your body is a degree or two warmer at rest than it is in the first part of your cycle. And your body is using all these resources to build up the lining of your uterus. So you actually like need to eat more in the 2 weeks between ovulating and getting your period.
That's why you feel so snacky. Yeah, I feel really like snacky during that time.
Yes, and it's literally because you might not be getting enough calories. Your body might be like, feed me. I am building something. I need fuel.
That's interesting about the temperature too. I always assumed that it was going up because I have 2 cats sleeping on me that are making me way hotter, but
Well, possibly, but
it's probably both.
yeah. So the corpus luteum, which is secreting progesterone, secretes more and more progesterone. If there is no embryo that implants in the uterus, then after a certain amount of time, the corpus luteum kind of dies. It just goes away. It stops releasing progesterone. And your progesterone levels take a deep dive. They go from really high to really low very quickly.
And then it like loops back around to the menstruation part.
Yeah, so it goes really low, and then while you're menstruating and during your follicular phase, it's flatlined. It's not doing anything. And so the drop in progesterone, this like cliff dive of progesterone, is what signals the release of prostaglandins, which are not hormones, but they are messengers like hormones. The prostaglandins fit into receptors in the uterine muscle and tell the uterus to squeeze, which starts your period.
Interesting. So it basically is like, it goes in and is like, is there a baby? Is there a baby? Is there a baby? Oh, we're prepping for it. Oh, no baby. And then it drops off.
Exactly. This egg had a certain amount of time to get fertilized and implant in the uterine wall. If it didn't do that, corpus luteum is out of commission, going on vacation. See you next month. Okay, after showing you that hormone chart, you kind of understand what's going on with the hormones and what the hormones are messaging the organs to do. Do you understand why you probably have heavier periods and more cramps now?
Yes, that makes sense. Why you would bleed so much more. Because I use the Diva Cup, but I, for the first time, had to like change it during the day, which I had never had to do ever. And I was like, oh, that's never happened. That was a very like heavy period for me.
Yeah. You may actually notice that you'll have like a really bad cramp or a series of bad cramps, and then you'll like take out your Diva Cup and there'll be a huge ass clot.
Oh, wild. Yeah.
Because your body was literally birthing the clot and it had to get through the cervix. So you had to like squeeze to get it out.
Oh, I wonder if that's what that was that other day. I'm like,
Maybe.
I should have looked after because that was bad. I didn't really know what a full cycle was. Like, I thought that just was my period. And then it was like, what do you mean a 28-day cycle? And then I was like, oh, no, that's like the whole month between from my period to the first day of the next one. And not understanding that each time period has its own thing, and kind of seeing that laid out in that chart made a lot more sense to me. Because yeah, you just don't really know what your body is doing. And like even tracking all this stuff, back in the day, they didn't have apps to track all this and do all these tests and stuff.
Well, and I am glad that you are testing for ovulation as well as being in an app, because what I learned recently is that apps are going off predictive models that are based on averages, and none of us really align with the averages 100%. And so apps are only about 20% effective at knowing when you're going to ovulate.
Oh yeah, when it said my ovulation week was, it wasn't. I was like peaking after that. And I was like, oh, this isn't accurate. This isn't actually like what my body is doing.
I have 25-day cycles and I ovulate at day 11. You don't know unless you are reading your body's signals. Also, the day you ovulate changes all the time. Like if you travel, you're going to ovulate differently. If you change your diet, you're going to ovulate at probably at a different time. Like again, your body is constantly taking in signals, information, and adjusting its messages accordingly. And that's what you want it to be doing. That's what it is built for.
It's supposed to be reactionary and like preparing
Yes.
for things that are in your life.
Nothing is going wrong if your cycle is reacting to things that are happening in your life.
I also saw an OBGYN on TikTok, of course, that was talking about your LH levels. Because I looked up, like, what are they supposed to be? And I was like, oh no, my levels are reaching nowhere close to those numbers. And then basically this OBGYN was saying, like, as long as you are seeing a trend of your numbers being low and then having a peak and then a decline again, it's doing what it's supposed to be doing. And there's not like a number you're supposed to reach. And I was like, oh, okay. You want to know that your body's doing the right thing and that you're doing the right thing and that your body's working. And the more information you look up and like the more I hear from you too, you're reassured that there is no normal and your body is doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing. And it's also learning how to do what you want it to do.
When it comes to hormones, the exact amount or level doesn't matter as much as the level compared to other hormones. We just talked about this in the ovarian cyst episode, but sometimes when your FSH is super high and higher than your LH or your estrogen, you don't get the signal to ovulate because the FSH is like louder than the signal to ovulate. If you're only tracking one hormone, you might be missing the whole picture. It might be like, oh, LH is totally on track, doing what it's supposed to do, but you might be missing that FSH is going nutso, like going way too high. And so it's not sending the signal that it would be if FSH was like in proportion. And that's really what your body is relearning how to do, is how to like keep everything in proportion, which is why we have this phrase hormone balance, which is kind of misleading because it's never like I've balanced, I've done it, and I'm done. It's like a constant process. It's a constant flow. But that's why hormone balance can be a useful phrase, because we're not talking about just like a correct level. And this also helps us understand why your boobs are getting sore.
Getting to my boobs.
Yes. What we've all been waiting for. So just looking at this chart again, you can see this spike of estrogen right around ovulation, right before ovulation. Spikes in estrogen, especially if they are like higher than they need to be, if they are like maybe a little out of whack, spikes in estrogen affect your breast tissue, because the spikes in estrogen during pregnancy and breastfeeding is also what is signaling your boobs to have milk in them. Not that your boobs are full of milk, but that this estrogen might be like higher than it needs to be as your body is like figuring it out. It's like, wait, try this amount of estrogen. And it's like, that's too much.
They're like, oh, too much. No, reel it back.
Yeah. And it's kind of blasting all over your body, and it is making the glands in your breasts swell up. Also, your body's like, what's going on in the boobs? Like, let's send some blood and some like inflammatory stuff there to like make sure it's okay. And so then there's more circulation, which can feel hot. There's more sensitivity. There's more like fluid being retained there, possibly. The estrogen is probably causing that kind of boob pain.
That's so interesting. I never had much nipple sensitivity. I haven't thought about it that much. And it was so noticeable when it happened. Even putting on a bra, I was like, wow, like I really have noticed what a difference this has been. Now that I'm seeing this chart, it was like, yeah, like right before the LH spike and during it is when I noticed that change.
Yes, what happens to me is my boobs hurt right before I get my period. So boobs hurting can be high estrogen, or it can be high progesterone, which is more likely right before you get your period. It's really common to have sore boobs before you get your period. That's more to do with like fluid retention than the actual stimulation of the glands. So yeah, that is why your boobs are hurting. There's just probably a little too much estrogen.
So weird.
Estrogen is a hormone that backs up very quickly. So if you are constipated, if you're having gut issues and you're like, things are not moving through very fast, if you're having any issues with your liver, or your liver is so busy processing alcohol that it doesn't have time to process hormonal waste, things can back up and your estrogen load can just be really high. And it can cause symptoms like that.
I mean, we were just on vacation in Hawaii drinking a lot of tiki drinks, so that might actually help explain
100%.
what was going on.
And again, nothing wrong with that. Doesn't mean you have to like live like a monk, but just knowing this might contribute to why you're having that symptom. And if it's really bothering you, there are very easy, small changes you can make to just like help your liver out, drinking more water, having a lot of fiber to like sweep all that estrogen out. Before you get into any medication, any supplements, just like make sure that your body has space to deal with all this stuff and maybe can like clean it out a little more efficiently, like take away from the load it's dealing with.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I think throughout most of my life and into my 20s, just like did not listen to my body. Anything it said, I was like, shut up, I'm drunk. I'm not going to pay attention to you.
Yeah.
And now for the first time, I'm like, ooh, what's going on? Like, what's happening in here? Did not listen to you for a very long time and just ignored whatever you said and did anything I wanted to do. And now like I'm actually trying to like prep my body and be in the best health and know what's going on. And with no data references, because I did ignore it for so long, it's hard to know what is right or normal for me.
100%. Okay, have I answered your questions?
You've answered beyond my questions.
Okay.
So many other questions that I had that came up during it. And I feel like now I have a better understanding of what birth control was doing, but like to me, even more importantly, like what my body is trying to do now, which I think is really informative because when you change something or you have a plan, especially because I'm an insane, psychotic, anxiety-ridden event planner, I want to plan everything, every aspect of everything that's happening. And your body doesn't work that way. So just knowing that like it's trying to figure things out and it hasn't done this for a really long time. So me expecting it to be perfect right away is not realistic. And that I am doing fine and that like my body is doing what it's supposed to be doing, I think was all really reassuring. And also like understanding my cycle better, what a cycle does, what it looks like, and the like hormones that are being released throughout that cycle and what their purposes are. All things I feel like I should have already known, but better late than never. I'm glad that I know them now.
Yeah, it's not simple. We don't even get a dumbed down version of this a lot of the time.
Honestly, ChatGPT has been like a big lifesaver for me as far as vitamins. And I literally like uploaded my blood test results into it and asked a bunch of questions. And like, obviously that's not the go-to, don't rely on it 100%.
But it can get you somewhere.
Yeah, it can get you somewhere, at least lead you in the right place, like the right direction to research more.
In this world, like any tool we have is better than nothing. And I will say ChatGPT pulls from the entire internet. So there is a lot of misinformation in the soup that it's pulling its answers from. There is a lot of old, debunked, wrong information that it is pulling from, even if it's pulling from scientific articles. Use that as a starting point. Double check your answers, go verify, bring it to your doctor and get a confirmation, but it can be a place to start.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for bringing me your story and for being so open. I really hope this helps other people who are going through a similar thing or are thinking about going through this or planning for it if they're psycho planners like we are. It means so much to me that you would open up and tell your story here and let me research for you.
Thank you for doing all that research. I appreciate it.
My literal pleasure. That's it for this week's Cramped. If you have had an experience with going off of birth control that you would like to share, we would love to hear it over on the Cramped Discord, which you can join by supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/cramped. I absolutely welcome any corrections or further information. You can reach out to me on Instagram at Kate Helen Downey or email us at crampedpodcast@gmail.com. See you next time. Cramped is hosted and created by me, Kate Helen Downey. Kelsey DeLonzo is our editorial producer. Sound design and mixing is by Kelly Kramerick at Maven Post Media. Cramped's incredible theme song is written and performed by Faraday. Our podcast art was created by Nicholas Shepard.
What's happening to your body? We don't know because we've never really studied the female body.